welcome to Demming Chronicles, where we seek the opinions of persons whose ideas can make a difference to our country. On today's program, we have Dr. Bhoe Tewarie. Welcome to the program, Dr. Tewarie.
Thank you so much for having me, Denise. I appreciate it.
Thank you very much. And our next guest, Fitzroy Hoyte. Welcome, Fitzroy.
Thank you for having me, Denise.
Demming Chronicles. We'll be back with you shortly. Welcome to Demming Chronicles Season 2, and we begin today's program with Dr. Tewarie, who is with us. Dr. Tewarie, I want to get straight to the point. Trinidad and Tobago has been described as having an implementation deficit. What must change for that deficit to disappear?
Well, a lot of things must change, but I think it is important to understand where the deficit is. A deficit means that you have a gap between in implementation. It means that you have a gap between what you intend to do or say that you are going to do and what actually happens, what actually takes place. So I think when you think about implementation, you think about projects, first of all, so that if there is an implementation deficit in projects, it means that you are not basically identifying the project and the project cycle, the elements of the project cycle properly, and you are not locating this in time sequences properly, and you are not managing the resources properly to get the end result.
But Dr. Tewarie, what you are describing there is a whole management cycle that is not working. Why is it not working?
Well, it's not only projects though. Projects are part of, let's say you have a plan or an agenda for the country. I think we're talking government, right?
Yes.
If you have a plan or agenda for the country, that means a whole set of projects that you have to implement. So each one of those projects has to be managed. Each one of them has to have a project cycle. Each one of them has to have a timeline. Each one of them has to have an assessment of results along the way, and eventually monitoring and evaluation, which includes some kind of continuous assessment, not just at the end. So if you going with an agenda in which you have a series of projects, then I think that the whole business of how you manage resources and how you manage the management of it, the execution of it is really important. And in a government, I think two ministries are critical in addition to the individual ministries that are implementing the various projects or the various plans. Okay? One is the Ministry of Planning, which gives you a kind of framework and which gives you a sense of where the vision for the country is and how these things fit. And then the other one is the Ministry of Finance, which provides the financial flow to make the projects possible. And again, both of these things have to be monitored. If you're monitoring the expenditure, you want to know if you spend 60% of the money, is 60% of the project finished or 60% of the work finished? And if you're managing from the planning point of view in terms of achieving a certain result, you want to know along the way how far you are in relation to the ultimate results that you are seeking, rather than just wait for the end. So a lot of coordination, a lot of collaboration, a lot of cooperation, and very tight managerial capacity in the process of assessment, monitoring, and evaluation has to take place.
So what you're implying is that we're not performing, or we're doing badly on collaboration, on cooperation, and on measurement and evaluation. How could these things be strengthened?
Well, you know, in the Ministry of Planning, when I got there initially in 2011, I think, there was a monitoring and evaluation unit. And I strengthened that, and we had monitoring and evaluation reports on implementation of policy each year from 2011 to 2014. We did not have, I think we had one in 2015, but for 2014, not 2015. But those stopped, and I think the unit was allowed to, I don't know, it was allowed to attrition and eventually die. And I think that is part of the problem. But I think that there are many upfront issues as well, which is that when you identify the project or sets of projects, the question of what is it you are managing, why are you managing it, how are you going to get it done, who is in charge of what, all of these things. I mean, it really takes meticulous detail. I mean, I know, were a very good MBA student, and I think in one of your courses, at least one of your courses, you would have had to address this issue of how do you get things done? How do you achieve results? And it's not that the knowledge is not there, but the structures, the systems, the clearly identified processes in sequence, and the resource allocation at the appropriate time, together with financial support and managerial oversight, those things do not come together. So it comes back to the issue of cooperation and collaboration again in the process of managing anything to fruition.
But Dr. Tewarie, cooperation and collaboration are not things that we do well. If I just look at the parliament, I do not see cooperation and collaboration. And one of the things that I believe in is that people need others to follow. They need to follow systems, processes, procedures. If they're not seeing it in the parliament, they are unlikely to engage it in the workplace. So how are we going to fix that?
Well, I think you're raising the whole question of leadership and leadership style. I think we have a problem with leadership style in this country. You do not have genuinely collaborative leaders. You do not have leaders want you to cooperate with them, but they don't want to be part of the cooperation process. In other words, they would tell you what to do and you have to fall in line. But, the collaboration and cooperation means a certain kind of spirit, a certain kind of democratic framework. And I think this is missing, and it has to do partially with the structure of our political party system, which is very adversarial. It has to do with the Constitution, which gives a lot of power to the executive and does not really make the executive accountable enough to Parliament. And it has to do with practice and style of leadership and governance. Because if you want the Parliament to be a cooperative place, it can in fact become a cooperative space, besides, in spite of the divisions or the antagonism or the alignments that make for the realpolitik of the country. I mean, if the Prime Minister and leader of the opposition, for instance, would get together at the beginning of an election term, let's say elections were today, and 2 weeks from now they get together, they have a serious discussion about how we operate, what is the nature of the accountability of the executive, because the executive is responsible for policy. How do they fit in terms of how do they operate the parliament to get maximum cooperation and maximum results? And this is honored in the process. It's not just talking before. You have to have good faith and honor, because that itself is a project. You have to assess, you have to evaluate, you have to hear different points of view, you have to reassess, you have to recalibrate, and so on. But you must be committed to it. And I think if we were able to do this, and I think we can, there's nothing that is not possible from a human point of view in terms of getting that right. But there has to be the will and the disposition. And if we got that right, I think it would help a lot, because I think the example will be set from the top. And I think a lot of people would follow. You see, people feel that following has nothing to do with leadership. But anybody who is a real leader knows that you demonstrate leadership by your ability to follow when it's necessary, when someone else has to take the lead, or someone more knowledgeable than you in that thing has to basically point the way. But that followership helps to make you as well a good leader, and makes you to appreciate the importance of communication, interaction, collaboration, engagement to make leadership and followership work to achieve results.
That is an excellent notion, Dr. Tewarie. But what in our history tells you that collaboration could even be put on the agenda?
Well, no, I think the history will show us, I think the whole Caribbean history will show us that basically at any one point, in any given point in time, is a one-man show.
Yeah.
Right? I think that is what the history would tell us. But
so given,
you know,
given that our history suggests one-manism, if I can call it like that,
yes,
given
yes.
that is history, what kind of intervention could we look forward to change that dynamic?
Well, I think you might require three things. One would be a leader with the disposition and willingness to try such an experiment. Okay, and that person really has to be very confident and very clear. That's to say, confident in himself or herself, confidence in the people, and an appreciation that with this kind of goodwill and disposition towards goodwill and collaboration, the confidence that he or she has in the people will in fact manifest, it will come to pass. But the second thing also is that he or she, the leader, together with his or her collaborators, have to be very clear on what is the vision that they are trying to achieve. What is the vision that they are trying to put in place? What is the desirable objective that they are trying to put into place? And it is then that the discussion becomes important, because people want to know where they fit in, how they can make the best difference. They want to know what are the elements that will ultimately lead to that better place, that more desirable place, and so on. And that is how the conversation, the communication, the collaboration, the engagement really stimulates enthusiasm, participation, and energy, because those things are important. I remember some years ago, Peter Senge came to Trinidad and Tobago. And I asked him a simple question, and I was surprised at the answer. And I asked him a question of what is the secret to human resource management. How do you get the best out of people? And he says, with all due respect, you are asking the wrong question. He said to me, the right question is, how does leadership tap spirit and energy? He says, if you address that particular issue, how does leadership tap spirit and energy? You will solve all the human resource questions that you are implying by that question that you asked. And I've thought about it many, many years over and over again afterwards and tried to practice some of it in the things that I do. And I think he was absolutely right.
So on that note, Dr. Tewarie, that say it again, leadership, what is it he said?
How does leadership tap spirit and energy?
And on that note, how does leadership tax spirit and energy? We bring this interview with Dr. Tewarie to a close. It's a hopeful note. It's a note on which I do hope some of our leaders will follow that Senge philosophy and tax spirit and energy. Thank you very much, Dr. Tewarie.
Thank you so much for having me. It was a pleasure.
Thank you very much. Demming Chronicles, Season 2. We'll be back with you shortly. Welcome back to Demming Chronicles Season 2. And on this segment, we welcome Fitzroy Hoyte. Fitzroy is an artist, but tell us, Fitzroy, how is it that you became an artist?
Okay, so thank you again for having me, Denise. How did I become an artist? I think to honestly answer that question, I didn't choose art. Art chose me, and I think we're all creatives, just more so on my end, it has been a journey, of learning. I can recall at a young age always being inclined to follow my older cousin who would draw, and from that stage it just continued. So I just continued to work on that gift, and I also believe that it's a spiritual gift that I have. So it allows me to share what I feel with society, what I see, it's part of my purpose.
Just before we move on, Fitzroy, tell me, which piece of art or which moment inspires you the most in your journey?
Which piece of art? So that question, again, it's because art for me is life. It's an ongoing process. I have created a number of pieces that would have like an indelible impression, but it's difficult to really have one piece, but it's more a theme, a journey, a message, and a vision. So there are a number of pieces that I would have created that I can say would have also impacted myself, and what I would have hoped would also leave a legacy of my work, for future generations.
Traditionally, we see the relationship between a lawyer, doctor, an accountant, and income generation. Tell me about that. How could art, for instance, you're an artist, what's the link between that and income generation, especially for a country?
Well, I would say, art has already been a part of everything. It's just sort of overlooked and underappreciated, because to be an attorney, to be a lawyer, to be a doctor, you have to be a creative. Your mind, it's your imagination, it's also a method, or a technique that we all use, and that's art. So beyond the mere fact that I would say even the way we speak, how we carry about ourselves, there's an art to do that. And if we look at life as step by step, when you learn to walk, when you learn to speak, that it's all art, so you absorb your environment, and you're able. So if I was born in the jungle, there will be a way that I would speak and operate it, as opposed to if I'm born in society, and that's just how we absorb, and that in itself is art, to answer, or to try to answer the question in terms of various in terms of
Various professions, I would say.
Professions, yes, thanks. As an artist, or choosing art to be my career, it has always been a challenge, because people don't see the value. We tend to put value to success in particular ways, and that's all sort of material, because in society, in order to truly or this in this society that we live in, people look at achievements as the way you are measured. So, and for artists or for creatives, you're on the opposite side, because you're creating, but it goes without a value. And until we come to terms and see that artists and creatives are actually documenting society, mirroring also it's collaborations, and it's really important in terms of like healing. Art is therapy, and I would say for society, without art, there's no society.
What is necessary for the creative sector in Trinidad and Tobago to thrive? What do we need to do?
So I would say, first off, creatives need to stop exploiting, the narrow aspect of what art can do. When you think of creativity, or you think of art in Trinidad and Tobago, it's sort of centered around performing arts, carnival, and those, in terms of that aspect of it. But the fine art, it's still not really appreciated or seen. And I think we don't have a museum, and these are things that I think is the foundation where it starts. In order for people to have an understanding of our history, which art allows you to, then you need to have a proper space, and there's no space for art right now in society, as opposed to other things that people may see as more important. And when I say people, I mean the people or the companies, or if it's government, or that can create that change. So artists need to be the change they want to see. And I think it's the idea of that question. It's almost as if when are we going to change as creatives, and see that it's really up to us.
So it's up to the artist and the creative to design the future that they wish to see. Wonderful.
Exactly.
Think of Trinidad 5 years down the road. What single change would you like to see that would make you feel that we are on the right road in terms of recognition of our creatives?
So one single change I think I'd like to see, and hopefully when the borders are reopened and people could travel, is that when you enter Trinidad and Tobago and you enter our airports, you see the art that we create. You would have a better understanding of the wealth of creativity that we have in our country. That I think that's something that it should have been done way beyond my time. You look at Jamaica and you look at our places around, and it's like, so what is going on in Trinidad? Are we just like various it's almost as if you have a company, then that's all they promote. So I think there are spaces for art, and art should not just, and that's why I said creatives need to look past just having an exhibition in a gallery, and but taking the art to another level, and that takes courage, and it takes risk, and it takes the mere fact that it's not just going to be about you, but more about the whole vision and purpose that you want to see in terms of that change.
And as we bring this interview to a close, Fitzroy, what comments would you have? What advice would you have for a young artist? What should they do? A young creative or someone who's a painter like you are, what should they be focusing on?
Okay, so beyond myself, I created a studio, which is Think Artwork TT Studio, and it's a space for creatives, where you can feel safe. There's a platform, and the idea behind it was just to see the change that I think was needed. I definitely believe beyond Trinidad and Tobago, there is so much to learn, and we have the internet, we have social media, we have these tools that allow you to get into mainstream rather than I would say the usual or the norm. So really believing in yourself is one, understanding that it's not an easy road, it's a risk, and being humble, because some creatives get a little full-headed and think that it's all about them, and we all have egos, and I would say the idea overall is if you could collaborate, work in terms of developing your brand, understanding that overall you are mirroring your society, and above all that no one really cares. Honestly, the mere fact that you may think people care, that's where that's your biggest mistake. People don't care. Artists, the ones who have been successful, have paved a way for themselves, and so it's not an easy road. So any young creative thinking about becoming an artist and thinking it's just a life of luxury, well, I'll see you're wrong, because I don't think you understand the true, the impact that, the choice that you're making. And some parents tell their children don't, but it is possible at the same time, and in any career, I would say it takes work. So art, whatever, field you choose as a creative, as as a painter, whatever it is, try your best and have faith, because it's a lot of faith.
Thank you very much for being with us today. Fitzroy Hoyte, artist, manager of an art gallery, someone who's saying to us that we are all creative and there's a spiritual part of creativity. Thank you very much for being with us. Demming Chronicles, Season 2. And on today's program, we chatted with Dr Bhoendradatt Tewarie and Fitzroy Hoyte. Reach out to us, like and share our program. Demming Chronicles, Season 2. Until next time, be safe.